I was looking at a high school curriculum the other day, just purely out of curiosity. And it was really fascinating when you actually look at the breakdown of hours.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Right. I mean, we spend, what, 12, maybe 16 years in the education system, and we spend hundreds of hours on isosceles triangles. We rigorously learn that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
And we memorized the exact date of the Battle of Hastings in 1066.
Yes, exactly. And look, I love history, and I'm sure triangles come in handy for somebody out there, but it really struck me that there is this one specific subject that literally dictates where we live, what we eat, how
Yeah.
stressed we are, the quality of our health care, and what opportunities we can actually say yes to in life.
Yeah.
And most of us are functionally illiterate in it.
It is the great paradox of modern education, really. We are engineered by the system to be workers, to be very, very good at a specific trade or task, but we are rarely taught to actually be owners of our own lives. You're talking about money, of course.
I am absolutely talking about money. It is the universal stressor. It's the thing that wakes people up at 3 in the morning just staring at the ceiling. And today we are doing a deep dive into a text called the Financial Freedom Blueprint.
Right.
And I want to be very clear right off the bat because I can practically hear you, the listener, rolling your eyes right now. This isn't one of those buy my crypto course and get a Lamborghini next Tuesday kind of things.
Far from it. In fact, if there is one overarching theme in the source material we're covering today, it's that get rich quick is usually just a synonym for get broke even quicker.
Yeah, that's so true.
This blueprint is really a comprehensive guide to mastering the underlying mechanics of wealth. It's about moving from a mindset of survival, which is honestly where most people live, regardless of how high their income is, to a mindset of strategy.
That distinction, survival versus strategy, is huge because the premise here is that culturally, we are traditionally taught three things. We're taught how to earn money, how to spend money, and how to worry about money.
Exactly. And that third one, the worry that consumes a massive amount of cognitive bandwidth. The mission of this deep dive really is to break that cycle for you. We want to take the insights from this text to help you understand how to manage your money, how to grow it, and how to actually make it work for you.
Right.
Because the source makes a very bold claim right in the introduction. It says wealth building is not reserved for the lucky. It isn't reserved for the privileged few who happen to be born with a trust fund. It is a skill.
I love that framing so much. It's a skill, just like playing the piano or, coding a website. It can be learned.
And if it can be learned, it can be mastered. But before we get into the weeds, we really have to define what we are actually aiming for here, because a lot of people hear the phrase financial freedom and they immediately picture sitting on a beach doing absolutely nothing for 40 years.
Which sounds incredibly boring after about week 3, honestly. You just get sunburned and restless.
Precisely. The blueprint defines financial freedom very differently. It defines it simply as choice. Yes, it's not necessarily about never working again. It's about having autonomy over your time. It's about having choice over your location, where you live and work. And crucially, it's about the ability to say no to the things that drain you and yes to the things that light you up.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to get to that point of choice, we have to start somewhere that I think almost all mainstream financial advice totally ignores. Usually people jump straight to the tactical stuff, right? Like, what index fund should I buy? Or how do I format my budget spreadsheet?
Oh, all the time.
But this source says stop. Don't even touch a spreadsheet yet. We have to look at the psychology first.
That is the absolute foundation. Section 1 of our dive today is purely about the internal narrative. Because before you ever earn a single dollar or invest a single dollar, you already have a relationship with money. And for the vast majority of us, it's a highly complicated relationship.
Oh, absolutely. It's formed by our parents, by our culture, maybe by that one time we lost a $20 bill when we were 6 years old and got yelled at.
It goes incredibly deep. The source material refers to these ingrained beliefs as scripts.
Right.
And common damaging scripts include things like money is scarce, or money is the root of all evil, or my personal favorite, wealth is for other people, not for people like me.
I think money is scarce is a huge one for so many people. It's that pervasive feeling that as soon as a paycheck comes in, it's immediately going to disappear. So you better hold on to it tight, or conversely, you need to spend it immediately before it vanishes on its own.
And that right there is where the danger lies. These beliefs aren't just passing thoughts. They actively drive self-sabotage. If you subconsciously believe that money disappears fast, your behavior will actually align with that belief.
Meaning you will find ways to make it disappear.
Exactly. You'll make impulse purchases, or you'll purposely ignore your bills until they rack up late fees. You are unconsciously reinforcing your own narrative that money is hard to keep. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So how do we flip that script? Because the source introduces a concept here that I found really, really liberating. It calls it money neutrality.
This is a crucial pivot point in the text. Money is neutral. It does not have a moral compass. It is merely an inanimate tool. The source states this explicitly: money does not create character. It amplifies it.
I really like that. It amplifies character. So if you're naturally a generous person, having more money just makes you a philanthropist. But if you're a jerk, having more money just makes you a louder, more powerful jerk.
That's exactly it. It reveals your existing habits, your priorities, and your level of discipline. Once you truly internalize the fact that money is neutral, it stops being this massive emotional trigger for you. It stops being a source of shame or guilt or fear.
It becomes a tool, like a hammer.
Exactly. A hammer isn't inherently good or bad. You can use it to build a house for your family, or you can use it to break a window. Money is exactly the same.
So the wealthy, and when we say wealthy in this context, we mean the people who have mastered this skill, not just high-income earners. They operate on a fundamentally different framework. It's not that they are inherently smarter than everyone else, right?
Not at all. High IQ does not correlate perfectly with high net worth. The text makes that very clear. The difference is the mental framework. The source highlights a few massive shifts in how they think. First, they focus on ownership rather than consumption.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, most people look at a paycheck and ask, what can I buy with this? The wealthy look at that same money and ask, what can I own with this?
Wow, that's a massive shift in perspective. Instead of buying shoes, you're buying assets. And the second shift is about the timeline, right?
Yes. Long-term thinking versus short-term comfort. This is really the engine of the entire mindset shift: delayed gratification. The blueprint asks a very pointed question. Are you willing to sacrifice a little bit of comfort today for a massive amount of freedom tomorrow?
Right.
Because if you can't answer yes to that, no amount of technical spreadsheet knowledge is going to save you.
It reminds me of that classic marshmallow test they did with kids. You know, the kids who could hold out and wait for the second marshmallow ended up having better life outcomes. It's exactly that, but with compound interest.
That is the perfect analogy. It's resisting the urge to eat your seed corn so that you can actually plant a harvest for next year.
Okay, so we've got the mindset down. We're working on identifying our internal scripts. We understand that money is just a neutral tool, and we're focusing on ownership. Now let's get into the actual gears of the machine. Section 2 of the dive is all about the mechanics of control.
Right.
And this naturally starts with cash flow.
Cash flow is simply the movement of money in and out of your life. It sounds incredibly basic, but the source makes a very nuanced point here that a lot of people miss. Income without control leads to stress.
Yeah.
You can make $1 million a year, but if you spend $1,001, you are functionally broke. Conversely, control without income leads to stagnation. You can budget every single penny with military precision, but if you only make $10 a year, you're never getting to freedom. You absolutely need both.
The phrase from the text that really stood out to me was about where we place our focus. The source says most people focus entirely on what they earn. They obsess over the top-line salary figure. But the wealthy focus on what they keep, and more importantly, how they deploy it.
That deploy part is critical. Tracking your cash flow, actually knowing where every single dollar goes, isn't about restricting your life. It's about awareness. You cannot fix a leak you can't see.
Right.
When you track it, you gain power over it. When you ignore it, the money controls you.
Which naturally leads us to the dreaded B word, budgeting. I feel like for most of the population, the word budget just feels exactly like the word diet. It implies misery, limitation, and eating plain celery.
It has a terrible public relations problem, that's for sure. The source tackles the stigma head-on. We need to completely rebrand the concept of a budget. A budget isn't a mechanism of torture. It is simply a plan.
A plan.
Yes. It doesn't tell you what you cannot do. It simply tells you what you are actively choosing to prioritize.
I think the emotional benefit of this reframing is hugely underrated. The source mentions that assigning every dollar a specific purpose actually removes the guilt of spending.
It absolutely does.
Okay.
Think about it in practical terms. If you have a dining out category in your budget and you intentionally put $200 in there for the month, you can go spend that $200 on incredible sushi and feel zero guilt. None at all.
because it was part of the plan all along.
Exactly. You don't have to sit there at the restaurant wondering, should I be buying this? Am I ruining my future? You already decided beforehand that you could.
That is freedom right there. It turns what feels like a constraint into permission to enjoy your life.
Precisely. And in terms of how to actually structure this, the source suggests a very simple mental model. Look at your expenses in two broad categories, those that build the future and those that consume the future.
Oh, I really like that framing. Consuming the future. That's like, well, that's high interest credit card debt payments or those streaming subscriptions you literally never log into, or impulse buys from late night scrolling that just end up in a landfill.
Right. Those are consuming your future choices, and building the future is your savings, your investments, buying books or courses for education. The goal isn't to live like a monk and cut out all joy. The goal is alignment. Your spending should directly reflect your actual values.
So if you value travel, spend on travel.
Exactly. Spend lavishly on the travel, but cut mercilessly on the things you don't actually care about.
And perfection isn't the goal here either, right? I think a lot of people try to make the most mathematically perfect budget. They fail to stick to it in month one, and then they just throw their hands up and quit entirely.
Implementation is always messy. Consistency is the goal, not perfection. You will overspend sometimes. You will totally forget to track a random cash expense. That is fine. Just get back on the horse the next day. It's about directional progress.
All right, let's keep this momentum going and move to section 3. We've got the psychology sorted. We've got the cash flow awareness. Now we are getting into defense and offense. Let's start with defense, which usually involves the biggest elephant in the room, debt.
Debt is such a polarizing topic in personal finance. Some gurus scream that all debt is evil and you should never borrow a dime. But the source takes a much more sophisticated, nuanced view. Debt is a tool. And like any tool, it can be dangerous or it can be highly useful, depending entirely on how you hold it.
So the text distinguishes between what are called toxic debt and strategic debt. Let's break those down for the listener.
Let's start with toxic debt, which is primarily consumer debt. We're talking rolling credit card balances, payday loans, financing a luxury vacation you can't actually afford. This type of debt literally steals your future income.
Because you've already spent tomorrow's paycheck.
Exactly. It limits your flexibility because you are forced to go to work just to pay for yesterday's impulsive decisions. It creates immense psychological pressure.
And what about strategic debt? How does the blueprint define that?
Strategic debt is leverage that can actually accelerate your wealth growth. This might be a mortgage on a rental property that actively generates monthly cash flow, or a loan to start or expand a business that produces profit.
Right, or even student loans, depending on the degree.
Yes, student loans for a specialized degree that significantly increases your lifetime earning potential. Though, as the source notes, that specific one is getting much trickier to navigate these days. But the ultimate litmus test the source provides is brilliantly simple. Does this debt produce income or does it consume income?
That is such a great mental check before swiping a card or signing a loan. Does this produce income? If the answer is no, you need to be very, very careful.
And regarding that toxic debt, the source emphasizes a concept called margin. Paying off consumer debt isn't just about the math of saving on interest rates. It's really about creating breathing room in your life. Yes, when you don't have a dozen monthly payments weighing you down, you suddenly have options. Margin creates opportunity. Think of it this way. If you lose your job but you have zero debt, it's an inconvenience. If you lose your job and you have massive monthly debt obligations, it is a full-blown catastrophe.
That connects perfectly to the next defensive layer, the blueprint outlines, which is saving. And I found this fascinating. The source describes saving not as something you do out of fear of the unknown, but as the psychology of resilience.
I love that reframe so much. Saving is so often sold to us as hoarding pennies for a rainy day, which just sounds depressing and fearful. But resilience sounds powerful. An emergency fund, just having cold, hard cash in the bank, protects you from life's inevitable unpredictability.
Because things will happen.
Flat tires happen, unexpected medical bills happen, layoffs happen.
And when those things happen, if you have robust savings, they're just minor annoyances. You just write a check and move on. They do not become life-altering crises.
Exactly. You are essentially buying your own peace of mind. And there's a really subtle identity shift that happens here too. When you build the habit of saving, you slowly build trust in yourself. You are reinforcing the internal identity of someone who is capable, who plans ahead. You aren't saving because you expect terrible things to happen. You're saving so that when normal life friction happens, you remain entirely in control.
Okay, so that is our defense. Now, let's flip the playbook and play offense. Investing. This is usually where people's eyes glaze over with boredom or they just get paralyzed by fear. But the source has a great line: saving protects, investing grows.
And this is where the real magic happens. This is the concept of making your money work for you. When you just work a standard job for money, you are trading your time for dollars. That is a strictly linear equation. You only have so many hours in a week to sell.
Right, you cap out eventually.
But when you invest, your money creates more money, and then that new money creates even more money. That is an exponential equation.
And time is the biggest factor here. The longer you let it run, the better.
Time is your absolute greatest ally. This is where we get into the math of compounding. The source puts it beautifully. Compounding rewards patience. Starting early drastically reduces the sheer amount of financial effort required later in life. It's the snowball effect. A tiny little snowball rolling down a really, really long hill eventually becomes an unstoppable avalanche.
But I think we really need to distinguish between true investing and gambling. Because I talk to people all the time who think investing is just downloading an app, picking the next hot meme stock or crypto coin, and just praying it goes to the moon.
That is gambling, pure and simple. Gambling relies entirely on luck and timing. True investing, according to the blueprint, relies on ownership, consistency, and time. The source is very clear on this. You do not need to predict the markets. You don't need to be some Wall Street wizard who knows what the S&P 500 is going to do next Tuesday.
So what is the actual strategy if we aren't trying to time the market?
It's remarkably simple. Regular contributions, diversified assets, long-term commitment. It's boring. In fact, it should be boring. If your investing strategy is giving you adrenaline rushes, you're probably doing it wrong. As the text says, wealth is built slowly, then suddenly.
Slowly, then suddenly. I love that. That's the classic hockey stick graph on a chart. You go 10 years thinking, wow, this really isn't doing much, and then suddenly the compounding kicks into overdrive and the line just shoots straight up.
Precisely. But getting to that sudden part requires emotional discipline, which naturally brings us to Section 4 of the blueprint, managing the journey. Because, as we all know, the journey is never a straight, smooth line.
Right. This section covers risk and income. Let's tackle risk first, because people are fundamentally terrified of losing their hard-earned money.
The harsh reality is avoiding risk entirely actually guarantees financial stagnation. If you just keep all your life savings stuffed under a mattress, inflation absolutely guarantees that you will lose purchasing power every single year. So you have to take on some level of risk to grow.
The goal is to manage it, not eliminate it.
Exactly. And the primary tools the source gives for managing risk are diversification and education.
Break those down. Diversification first.
Diversification simply reduces your exposure to any single point of failure. If you own stock in exactly one company and that company goes bust, you lose everything. But if you own a broad index fund that covers the whole market and one company goes bust, you barely even notice it on your statement.
And the second tool is education.
Yes. Education drastically reduces fear. Humans naturally fear what we don't understand. The more you learn about how market cycles actually work, the less terrifying a temporary economic downturn feels.
The source mentions something that really struck me. It says that short-term volatility is simply the price you pay for long-term growth.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Markets will go up and down. That is just the admission fee you pay for the historic returns. If you panic and sell all your assets when the market is down, you are actively turning a temporary on-paper decline into a permanent, locked-in loss. Emotional reactions destroy far more wealth than actual market crashes ever could.
That is so important to remember. Now let's talk about the other side of the journey equation, which is income growth. We spent earlier sections talking about cutting expenses and budgeting, but mathematically, there is a hard floor to how much you can cut. You still have to eat.
Exactly.
But there's practically no ceiling to how much you can earn.
This is what the source calls supercharging the system. Income is the single most powerful tool for wealth acceleration. If you manage to double your income while keeping your expenses flat, you can obliterate your debt and fill up your investment accounts twice as fast.
But how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
Because saying just go make more money is incredibly unhelpful advice.
The blueprint brings it back to the concept of value. The free market rewards value. It does not reward effort. You can work incredibly hard, sweating all day, digging a giant hole with a spoon, but the market is not going to pay you a high salary for it because it's not inherently valuable.
So skill development is the lever here.
Absolutely. Investing in yourself, whether that's learning a new programming language, mastering complex software, or even developing soft skills like public speaking and leadership, that provides returns that compound over your entire career.
And this inevitably leads to the idea of multiple streams of income.
Yes, this is all about establishing stability. Relying on exactly one source of income, like a single W-2 job, is actually incredibly risky. If your boss wakes up one day and decides they don't like you, or the company gets acquired and downsizes, your income instantly goes to zero.
So diversification applies to our income just as much as it applies to our investing portfolio.
Exactly. Income streams could be investments that pay regular dividends, a small side business, intellectual property like writing a book or creating a digital course, or freelance consulting.
But the goal here isn't to just hustle yourself into an early grave.
Not at all. The goal isn't exhaustion. We are not advocating for working 24 hours a day. The ultimate goal is leverage. You want to build income sources that aren't strictly tied to you physically punching a clock.
So we've built the mechanics. We're managing the risks of the journey and growing our income. Now let's look at the final section, section 5, the destination. Where is this entire blueprint actually leading us?
This is where the text transitions into strategy, lifestyle, and legacy. First, long-term strategy requires deep intention. You need specific goals to create direction in your life. If you don't know where you're going, any road will eventually get you there. Or, more likely, nowhere at all.
And the source radically redefines the concept of retirement here.
Yes, it does. Culturally, we are conditioned to view retirement strictly as an age. I will retire when I hit 65. But the blueprint argues that retirement is actually a financial state. It's a math equation.
How does the math work?
The benchmark is simple. When your invested assets produce enough passive income to fully support your desired lifestyle, working for money becomes optional. You have reached the destination. You could theoretically reach that math at 65, or 50, or even 35.
Or never, if you absolutely love your work and want to keep doing it. But the core point is you don't have to do it just to keep the lights on.
Correct. The obligation is gone. And that perfectly sets up the concept of lifestyle design. Money should strictly support your life. It should never define it. The source strongly warns against the trap of comparison.
Oh, keeping up with the Joneses is deadly.
It leads straight to what Thoreau called quiet desperation, overspending to buy things you don't need just to impress people who probably don't even care about you anyway.
So what is true wealth then, according to the text?
True wealth is defined here as having abundance in 4 specific areas: time, health, relationships, and peace of mind. Because think about it. If you have a Ferrari sitting in the driveway, but you literally have no free time to drive it, your health is failing from chronic stress, and you have no loved ones to share the passenger seat with. Are you actually rich?
I would argue you're living a pretty impoverished life at that point.
Exactly. Intentional living is about prioritizing who you actually are over who society pressures you to be. It's designing a lifestyle that fits you perfectly, like a custom-tailored suit.
And finally, that brings us to the concept of legacy. This is the part of the deep dive that really goes beyond just us as individuals.
Wealth is always most powerful when it manages to outlive the person who originally earned it. But the source makes a very profound point here. Legacy is not just about leaving a massive pile of cash to your kids. In fact, leaving a pile of cash to someone who lacks wisdom can actually be a terrible curse.
The classic trust fund brat syndrome. They get the money, but they have no idea what it means or how to handle it, so they just destroy themselves with it.
Right. True legacy is about leaving behind wisdom and values. Teaching financial literacy to your children ensures sustainability for the next generation. If you teach your kids exactly how to fish, rather than just handing them a dead fish, you can single-handedly break the cycle of financial illiteracy for your entire family bloodline.
That is incredibly profound. It literally changes the trajectory of a family forever.
It does. It is the absolute ultimate form of long-term thinking.
So let's bring this all together for the listener. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have. Let's quickly synthesize the arc of the blueprint. We started by fixing the foundation, the mindset, identifying those toxic internal scripts and realizing that money is just a neutral amplifier.
Then we moved to controlling the flow of money, understanding cash flow and utilizing budgeting not as a restriction, but as a prioritization tool.
From there, we built the defense with emergency savings and strategic debt management, and we launched the offense with investing and harnessing the power of compound of time.
And finally, we discuss managing the inevitable risks of the journey, supercharging our income through skills, and designing a life and a legacy that actually means something deeply personal to us.
It is a brilliantly comprehensive system. But here's the critical thing the listener needs to understand. You don't just do this blueprint once on a Sunday afternoon and then you're done forever.
No, definitely not. Financial literacy isn't a destination you arrive at. It is a lifelong practice. You as a person will evolve. Your goals will change over time. The global economy will constantly shift.
The key takeaway is that the fundamental power dynamics have shifted in your life. Money no longer controls you and your anxiety, you dictate and control it. Freedom is built one single decision at a time. Every time you consciously choose to save, every time you choose to read a book and learn, every time you choose to invest a portion of your paycheck, you are placing another solid brick in the wall of your own eventual freedom.
I really love that visual. Freedom is built one decision at a time. It makes this massive, intimidating topic feel actionable. It makes it real for anyone listening.
It firmly puts the agency back in your own hands where it belongs.
Well, thank you for expertly walking us through this blueprint today.
Yeah.
It has been incredibly eye-opening for me.
My pleasure. It is such a vital topic to unpack.
And to you listening right now, we always want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We talked earlier about how money is totally neutral. It simply amplifies who you already are at your core.
Yeah.
So here's the question you need to ask yourself. If you achieved total financial freedom today, if your bank account was suddenly completely full and you never had to work for money again, what specific traits or values of yours would be amplified to the world?
That is the real internal work.
And more importantly, are you actually happy with that answer? Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you on the next one.